All right, everybody, we're back here with another edition of Minor League News and Brews. My name's Craig Toth from Bucks in the Basement, inside the Bucks basement. And if anybody is interested in prospects whatsoever, you will notice the man next to me and you will recognize him. It is Jonathan Mayo. Jonathan is a writer over at MLB.com, MLBPipeline.com. He's out there in the podcast world himself. I mean, just digging into everything prospects since I believe 1998. So somewhere around in there, probably before then.
No.
And also now going to be a published author here in a book that he just wrote, and it's called Smart, Wrong, and Lucky: The Origin Stories of Baseball's Unexpected Stars. Jonathan, how you doing today, brother?
I'm great. And I mean, I'm old enough. I started MLB.com in 99. So don't make me older than I am. And I started focusing on prospects in 2003.
Okay.
Long now. I mean, it's still 20 years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, I remember listening to you guys have during the podcast talking about how long you guys have been going to like the fall league and stuff, and it makes me think. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I would love to be doing that for as long as you guys have.
Well, that's one way of putting it. You know, Jim started covering prospects, I think, when Joe DiMaggio was coming up. So
yeah, he was in his Baseball America days. But today we're going to be focusing on the Pirates prospects, and I mean, over the past few years with Ben Cherington coming in, there's been a pretty large focus on the prospects. Prior to that, people probably knew maybe where the affiliates were located, didn't know too much about the teams, too much about the players, but that's become a different story over these past few years. And when Ben Cherington came in, you guys, you and Jim Callis over there, had them ranked as the 15 best farm system in Major League Baseball. Right now, they're about 8th. They've touched as high as 4th. And my thing is that, you know, you got 3 top 10 picks in a row, a number 1 overall pick. I kind of would expected them to jump into that top 5 and then maybe stay there. So, like, what's holding them back as to, you know, being able to hang on to one of those top 5 spots like the Dodgers or the Rays?
You know, without sort of dumping on our own process, but like farm system rankings, ranking of prospects is such a subjective thing anyway. But farm system rankings, you really get to splitting hairs. And I think, you know, there are systems that are maybe a cut above, and they are always in that top 3. You mentioned the Dodgers and the Rays. And, you know, but the difference between 4 and 8, there's not a huge amount. So some of it is just like when we go through it and we line them up, and, you know, we'll run it by some people and things like that. I think if I were to try to put my finger on one thing, it's that they have not developed as of yet that guy who's the impact elite level player, right? Their system is very deep. You know, I do the top 30, and it's always a good sign that when you get to 30 and you have like a few guys that you're like, well, are they on? Are they off? And those are still interesting guys. That's a sign of a good farm system. I think if you can add to that depth and have guys that profile as elite level players, and then eventually you have to perform as elite level players, then, you know, that's what kind of bumps you up. And I think, you know, what's happened with the Pirates is they're doing it the right way, and they're starting to get that pool of players at the upper levels who can come up and help. But none of them look right now as that sort of all-star caliber guy. Listen, even Brian Hayes in the big leagues, who is a tremendous player, hasn't performed quite up to what we thought. Now, that doesn't impact what their farm system looks like now, but when you have these guys get to the upper levels, and, you know, Nick Gonzalez is struggling with strikeout rate, and Liover Peguero, you know, goes back to Double-A, even though he's super young, and people were very excited about him. You know, I think that's probably the one little missing ingredient that keeps him from going from 7, 8, or wherever up into that, top 2 or 3.
Yeah, and when Ben Cherington came in, I mean, he talked about, giving, just a depth full of prospects to have, players to choose from at each position, as opposed to having, those impact level guys. But then also, at the same point in time, he's gone with a lot of high ceiling prospects. The one that you mentioned there, Aliova Piguero. So that's where my thing is that is this like the way that some other teams build, that they kind of spread that pool out, as opposed to just having that, hey, we've got 2 guys in the top 10 of prospects overall, but then we don't have maybe anybody else in the top 100, as opposed to where the Pirates are kind of like, we have a bunch of guys that are, kind of towards the, 50 to, 99, 100 range, and people that could get on there, but then we don't have that. I mean, we had an O'Neill Cruz, but other than that, we don't have a guy that's just like, man, this guy's a Wander Franco. This guy's a Mike Trout, something like that.
So I think it's a both and, right? The best systems do both of those things. And you look at what the Rays, you mentioned Wander Franco, and they just keep coming, right? The Dodgers, they just keep coming. You look at the Baltimore Orioles right now, and I think what the Orioles have been able to do is what the Pirates are hoping to do. And you don't copy anyone. Obviously you have your own ways of evaluating and developing, but the Orioles went from number 1 in the rankings to number 1 in the rankings, even after Adley Rutschman graduated. That's because they still had Gunnar Henderson and Grayson Rodriguez, and they keep adding these guys who keep getting better as they, so they turn into more elite level players. Gunnar Henderson was not a number 1 prospect right out of the gate. It took him a little bit. I mean, which is crazy to say since he's so young and he's in the big leagues now, but that's what I mean, the difference. So I think that what Ben Cherington and that front office has been able to do, and listen, Neil Huntington did the same thing, right? They built up the farm system. They had to start, they had nothing, and the window in Pittsburgh closes quickly. So hopefully they can find a way to sort of keep going, and that's where the depth comes in, and you keep adding players, and so where like the Rays are geniuses at making these trades. If I'm another team and the Rays call and they ask about a guy playing in like the Florida Complex League, I hang up the phone, because that guy ends up turning into like some great player. They're really, really good at that. But I think like Piguero, who I still think actually has a chance to be a very good big leaguer, that was a trade, and I think so they were trying to, not necessarily like under Neil Huntington when the team was winning, they made it trades with an eye towards the future, but they were all trying to get upper level guys or guys who were ready to help in the big leagues now. While I think when you're going to a full on rebuild, you're trying to get talent everywhere, up and down the system. And, there is some freedom in that when you're starting over again. It'll be interesting to see if they, continue to win at the big league level and they start to compete, even if it's not this year, it's next year, what they can do to use that depth to bring in big league pieces while not ruining the huge building effort that they've had.
Yeah, and like you said, nobody can build, the same way. We always look towards, the Rays. We have a sister podcast that does the White Sox, so we look at them a lot. And I mean, they had Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada, they had Dylan Cease, Michael Kopech, they had all this. And if Luis Robert, if 2 of these guys don't work out, then you look at their system now and it's like it's barren.
Well, and some of those guys were acquired first via trades and were like big league ready. Yoan Moncada came in, basically was in the, when they got him from the Red Sox. You can't even really give them credit for developing him.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, they do. I mean, Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease were both trade acquisitions. So, and the Pirates did some of that too. The problem being, of course, is that when they went to kind of clean out the cupboards, the big league pieces to bring in the Eloy Jimenez type prospects, they weren't there, and I live in Pittsburgh, and so I see all the local reaction to things, and there were, as is often the case with fan bases, unrealistic expectations as to what the return might be for any player that they traded away. Um, but I think that they've done as good a job as they can, given the big league pieces they had to trade away to bring in prospects. So that they've had to do it mostly through the draft and through international signings, and that can take a little bit longer.
Yeah, because you're getting a bunch of younger guys, and Leo Peguero is the type of guy that has, I guess it's like that attachment that he was, Ben Cherington's first big trade.
Mm-hmm.
So he obviously has a little bit more pressure there. But the one thing when we were talking about depth and things that can happen, I was looking through, the top 30 that you guys do over there at the MLBPipeline. And I was just like, okay, this guy was injured. Tamar Johnson started this year. He's our number one prospect. Started the season with a hamstring injury. Endy Rodriguez is only DHing right now due to a forearm strain. You go up to, the number 3, Henry Davis missed a lot of last year with a broken wrist. Nick Gonzalez, 2021 finger, 2022 Achilles,
yep.
2023 shoulder. Mike Burrows, number 9, Tommy John. Jared Jones is on the shelf right now. Lonnie White Jr., number 13, really hasn't been able to get going. Number 14, Hunter Barco. I'm just seeing him, pitch off of a mound for the first time because he's recovering from Tommy John.
Right. Jared At least he was hurt when they got him.
Yeah. Jared Triolo, hamate has surgery. Could be actually playing right now with O'Neal Cruz out. That was like one of the people that I thought they added to the 40-man for that. Dario Lopez, number 18, knee out for the entire season. Have you seen like a top 30 that just has this much injury at this point in time?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. I mean, I haven't done that kind of cross analysis, but that's a lot, and that's that is some of it is random, some of it, I don't know if you question development techniques, I wouldn't do that just because, I mean, like Henry Davis's injuries had nothing to do with how they were getting him prepared. They just, he just refused to back off the plate and kept getting hit. Hopefully that's behind him. Sometimes it happens when they're younger and they kind of figure out their way. So Tamar Johnson, if it were September in the big leagues and they're competing, I think he plays with that injury. But when he's a teenager who they just drafted and signed, there is zero reason to send him out until he's 100% ready to go. And so I don't worry about that one. Now, if he starts having recurring hamstring issues, then you start to worry, about what he's doing in terms of his, the flexibility, muscle preparation, all that kind of stuff. But for the right now, let's let him go out and play. The Mike Burrows, Tommy John surgery, that you see everywhere. There's, you can't. I don't know that you can go into any system and not have at least one prospect who, needs Tommy John, just had it, or has had it, in the past. So that's why pitching. There are a lot of people, a lot of smarter people than me in baseball who say there's no such thing as a pitching prospect.
That's what people say. I mean, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yep. Too much risk.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And you were talking about, when you make your top 30 list, and there's guys that, maybe, once you get to maybe 25 or say 28, it could be, okay, between 28 and 35 or so. I've heard that from a bunch of places that those guys are fairly similar. So, Braxton Ashcraft just added there because of a graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you would be, is there a couple guys that you're kind of keeping your eye on that maybe in that 31 to 35 range that could be the next guy to jump up onto the top 30 list?
I'm gonna get out my handy dandy list. I do have a couple of names. I mean, and there's there are differing levels of sort of value, right? There's the Colin Selby's of the world, who, that he has a chance to be the kind of guy. And the Pirates, I think, have done this about as well as most major league organizations in terms of cobbling together bullpens, on the cheap. I'm trying to find the other names. Ashcraft is an interesting one because he was a prospect and obviously got hurt. He just came back. And Manuel Torrero is an interesting guy. It was just a complex league, so we want to sort of see, but he has really good at bats. He makes a lot of loud contact. Started a little bit slow, but now he's doing real well. Trace Gonzalez,
just jumped up to Greensboro.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is when I talked to someone with the Pirates, he was still in Bradenton, but he's like, but he's probably going to move up soon. So, those are a couple of guys. I'd have to go searching for another spreadsheet. But those, I tend to be in constant contact with folks about who could be next, because that changes, right? Like I might have a 31 to 33 set for graduations or trades or whatever before the season starts, and it's a totally different three names by May 5th. Because guys get hurt or guys are performing or through spring training, it's there's not been that much minor league data, but their player development staff has seen them all through spring training and through now this first month of the minor league season. So that's an ever evolving list, and I tend to not just go from whatever I have in my stash. I'll go back and be like, hey, this is still a good guy to add, and they'll often give me another option. And that's why I ended up picking Ashcraft, because I just think, if he really has put the the injuries behind him, and there were many, so I don't know, I'd be tempted to kind of put him in a bullpen and try to get him moving in a hurry. He's still not that old, but there's a lot of upside there, and it's a big arm, right? So that's why I thought he was intriguing enough, even though he's, not some like 18-year-old wonderkind who's, just coming to the, the complex league for the first time. I like those upside plays when you're adding guys on at the end, but Ashcraft was intriguing enough that I thought he deserved the addition there.
Yeah, and Ashcraft was a guy that was a pretty well thought of prospect before the injury started happening. So I wasn't really surprised to see him up there. He's been performing pretty well this year. But Jonathan, we've got the easy questions out of the way. I've got the two probably the questions that most Pirates fans are probably asking of any prospect expert, anybody that's watching the prospects. Right now, we've got Endy Rodriguez hurt, hasn't been able to catch for the past couple weeks. Henry Davis absolutely on fire, on a tear down in Double-A. And the big discussion is, does Henry possibly supplant Endy as the first catcher up, or is this just early season fodder, as far as discussions go?
Both. Listen, because I think if what's going on with Endy Rodriguez's forearm really keeps him from catching for a prolonged period of time, then yeah, I think Henry Davis could catch in the big leagues before Endy Rodriguez. Now, does that mean he beats Endy Rodriguez to the big leagues? I don't know. Endy could hit his way. Like, the fact is that I don't think you call him up if he's only DHing, because those of us who watch the Pirates regularly, they have a pretty good system that they've set up where Kutch is handling a lot of the DH at bats, and you're not gonna bring Endy Rodriguez up to not play every day. Now, if the forearm is good enough for him to play the outfield or second base, I might put a first baseman's glove on his hand and let him try that for a little while, assuming he can throw at all, right? Like, I don't really know.
I don't know if anybody does.
Right. First, it was all very vague, and I don't think they, the last time I talked to anybody, they didn't even really know what the issue was, and it's not Tommy John, because he wouldn't be DHing, right? Even though you can swing a bat, but so you have to make sure that he can do anything with that arm, right? It's not like at first base you don't ever have to throw, and you can't just, I lived in New York when the Mets tried to have Mike Piazza play first base, and if anyone ever needs proof that you just can't have anyone play first base, that was a disaster. It just didn't work. It's it's not just like, oh, anyone can play there. So now Endy Rodriguez has good hands. He's athletic. Like I actually think he could play first base, and so I think it's the kind of thing where, all right, well, his arm is okay, but just not okay for catching. Then maybe that's a spot where I would put him. In and then maybe you can get him to the big leagues and you start mixing him in. Carlos Santana gets a day off, or he DHs some. Like they'll have to mix and match a little bit more. And if Endy can do everything but catch, because people don't realize like that's a lot of throws, right? Even back to the pitcher, that's where there's wear and tear. Then you could move him around some, or let him play second base every day. Like, they have all these different sort of interesting guys that they can move around the diamond. So that's a long answer to your original question, but I think that it's possible that Endy, if he gets going, could hit his way up and not catch. And then we'll have to sort of see, what Henry Davis's catching looks like. I think pretty soon they're going to have to move him up to AAA if they want him to have like another stop before they call him up. Let him get some at bats against guys with some big league experience who pitch backwards, things like that, and get him some more reps behind the plate. They split them up in a lot of ways because they wanted both to get reps catching. If Endy Rodriguez isn't catching, you might as well bring Henry Davis to AAA and let him catch there.
And I guess that's a great answer, though. Just it's going to depend on if Endy's coming back and if he's going to be able to catch. Because at that point in time, then like you said, the reason why Ben Cherington split them up was to get them both reps behind the plate. And it was fairly telling coming into spring training that Henry Davis brought one glove, and that was his catcher's mitt. And Endy Rodriguez brought like 5 different gloves, including a first baseman's mitt, everything. He brought like anything. He just kept on pulling out gloves, out of his bag. So that's very telling of, he would probably love to catch, but he also probably just, whatever you need me to do to get to the major leagues, I will do.
Right. And, so I think, and with Henry Davis, he is very keen on proving to people that he can catch, and he's heard from enough people that he can't. And, there will come a time where either the Pirates will say it's not working or it's not worth the extra time it's going to take for you to do it at the big league level, because we want that bat in the big league lineup. We tried to ask him about it beginning of the fall league about the experiment in right field, and he was not thrilled with the question. We'll just leave it at that. So it was like, what do you think of that experiment? He was like, it was fine. So I think, but at the same time, I've chatted with him. He loves Endy Rodriguez, and he understands that if they're both in the big leagues, there might be some moving around a little bit. And, he still would like to think of himself as the primary catcher, but he understood that maybe he'd DH, maybe he'd play, eventually first base or something like that some of the time, So it's not like it's, no, if I don't catch, forget it. I'm, packing up my stuff and going home.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and he definitely. The highlights that I've seen in the games that I've watched him, it's always been his arm. I mean, he's got an out guys because his arm is just absolutely insane.
Yes, and that's why you don't give up on it, right? Like that arm at first base would almost be like a crime. It's like when people talk about putting O'Neal Cruz at first base. I'm like, what? No.
Yeah, at least, and that's probably why the Pirates are like, we would try, Henry out in right field, because that's at least another place where his arm would be.
And you're right, and he's a good athlete. People don't realize, because he's big, strong. He sort of looks, like a big catcher, and he runs well. And like it would work out there. It's not that he couldn't do it. It's more that he wants to do the other thing.
Yeah. And here's the last hard question here, and we talked about this and we mentioned this a little bit before we jumped on here, and you gave me a little bit of a surprise answer somewhat, but right now it's Cruz and it's Skenes, and there's an argument on Pirates Twitter about which one it should be. You guys are putting out a bunch of mock drafts, and I kind of made a comment like, okay, it's between these two, and you kind of just looked at me a little bit strangely. So, what do you know that I don't know, Jonathan? Which
Oh,
is
I
probably
don't.
more.
I
I'm
don't. I don't
joking.
have any inside information, and we've had just the one like a real mock, first round mock, and my colleague Jim Callis did that, and we'll do them every other week for the next few. Because the draft, isn't until July. We have plenty of time. People love them, but like there's a limit to how many you can do, especially this far out. But yes, I think those are the two best choices, and it may come down to sort of what flavor the Pirates want. Um, right now, and I'm not basing this on any real inside information. I lean bat for the same reason we were talking about. Things can go wrong with pitchers. As good as Paul Skenes is, and he is very, very, very good. And maybe it's just like I think if I'm the one that's signing the check, I think I probably take Dylan Cruz. Now, those are the two guys that you're right there. But there are other options. If they're held hostage, and I'm not suggesting that either Dylan Cruz or Paul Skenes will do this because money for that slot, it's a lot, right? And even if they don't sign for full slot, there's going to come close to setting records and things like that. And I would warn against the Pirates trying to outsmart themselves. This is not a year to cut a deal. But there's Wyatt Langford in Florida, who now has 2 years. He got hurt this year, came back in a hurry, still is hitting. He's hitting like in any other year, people would be talking about Wyatt Langford's offensive year. He's hitting like 430 at Florida. It's just that Dylan Cruz is hitting 490 or whatever he's hitting, and has a better chance to play center field. I have had different scouts say different things. I had a national cross checker who told me that if he had the number one pick, he would take Walker Jenkins, the outfielder from North Carolina, the high school outfielder, who has been probably the talk of the spring season in terms of, listen, we had him in our top 6 or so in December, but he didn't have a very good summer. He was kind of dinged up and he didn't really get a show. And he showed up this spring in North Carolina, swinging the bat the way everyone knew he could. Ridiculous power, left-handed hitter. That's the difference between him and Wyatt Langford. Langford has the college resume that helps him. He's running better. He's playing center field. So now it's like, this guy's got a ridiculous offensive profile, and now maybe he's got a chance to play center field. Could he be better than Dylan Cruz when all is said and done? Maybe. And then there's Max Clark, who is from Indiana. And when you talk to scouts and when you ask them who from this draft class do you think, if everything clicks, and understanding high schoolers, there's a little bit of risk. If everything clicks, who has the best chance of being a generational superstar? And they pick Max Clark because he is a legitimate 5-tool guy who will play center field for a very, very, very long time. And he does everything exceptionally well, but he's a high schooler, right? So, and doesn't have the track record that Dylan Cruz does. So, yes, you're right. It is largely those two guys, but I think the Pirates are as they have shown that they're going to do. They did it in 21. They even did it last year when they were picking 4. They're going to wait to the last minute. They're going to go see all of those guys many, many times over. They're going to have different conversations, in terms of, well, what's it going to take to sign you? I don't know if that will come into play this year. I still think they should just take the best guy, and then it may come to, and if they do that, then it will come down to, do you want the hitter or do you want the pitcher?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough decision. Like you said, there's a lot of time to just see what they do and see what they say. And Cherington had said, when he was approached with the subject, he's like, we're looking at a bunch of guys because they definitely are. So, but anybody, if you need any, insight on the minor leagues, the Pirates, the draft, anything like that, please go follow Jonathan Mayo. Please go listen to guys over at MLBPipeline.com. Once again, go out there and get Jonathan's book, Smart, Wrong, and Lucky, the origin stories of baseball's unexpected stars. Jonathan, look at that. He's got it right there, everybody.
I just got it. Now it's not available until July, but this is what it looks like.
Do a pre-order, everybody. And for everybody else, just stick around because we're going to do some beer reviews.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer. Let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
All right, guys, this is one that people have been asking me to review. I've been doing a lot of the local, micro brews from around Pittsburgh, Allegheny City Brewing, Arbduration Brewing. I did 4 Points. There's just been a lot of different places. Everybody's saying when they go down to the Pirate game, and I'll be going down there tonight to watch them take on the Blue Jays, they stopped into Southern Tier. And you know what? There's nothing against Southern Tier. I love Southern Tier. Southern Tier is like the ones that brought me into probably craft beer drinking, maybe along with like the 60 and 90-minute IPAs from Dogfish Head. Those are the ones that got me in there. But they put out a new pack, and it has the two old ones in there, the Southern Tier IPA and the double IPA, the Imperial IPA. I've had those a bunch of times. Everybody knows the system we work with here. We're working with the WBOBA, the weighted based on batting average system. So the IPAs, given Southern Tier IPA, that's a 4.25 weighted down to a 375. The two times, that goes from a 375 down to a 325. That's one of those heavier ones. If I'm having one of those, it's probably me just having one of those, not having two. But they came out here. The New Haze was their New England IPA. I think I had it for the first time back in around 2019. And it was right when those New Englands were coming out. This comes in at 6%. I could drink this one like all day. I'm giving it a 450 weighted down to a 400. And then now they come out with this Juice Jolt. And I don't know if people like, fruity type beers. For me, I like a little bit of like the citrusy notes. That's right. Why I like the New England ones, the New Haze. But with the Juice Jolt, it seems to be that there's just a little bit too much juice in that for me. And also it's about a 6.8, which was very surprising. 350 goes down to a 300. And the one I've been drinking today is a new one. Never had this before. It's called the Hoptomic Rush, the Tropical IPA, coming in at 6.5. Give it a 375, weighted down to a 325. So that's Southern Tier. It's right there on the North Shore. Maybe me and Gary Morgan will stop by there today on the way down to the game and have one. For you that don't, welcome. Thank you to our guest again, Jonathan Mayo. Also, I don't know if anybody can see right here. I'm going to stand up for a second. We got the Bucks in the Basement shirts from our boys over at Yin's. Let's get the Y out, everybody that can see it over there. Go there, shop Yin's. 3 brands, one dine. Sorry there, Taylor. This is one brand for 3 dynasties. I kind of screw that up sometimes, but all their stuff's good. They got the Jagoff series. So go out there, support them, support all minor league teams, watch all the minor league games. Let's go Indians. Let's go Curve. Let's go Hoppers. Let's go Marauders. And I will be out there on Mother's Day. So after the next recording out in Altoona with my family and my mom to celebrate Mother's Day. And also happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. We'll catch you next time.